Okay, I was adjusting my what do we call it? Recording studio. It's my iPhone. I have it in a little thing, and it wasn't quite adjusted right. So anyway, said we're going to talk about that little cerebellum. And the cerebellum, it's got two halves just like your cerebrum. Don't you love these names? It's almost the same. Cerebellum, cerebrum. Ay, ay, ay. What can you do? Anyway, so the cerebellum is this lower bun-like structure, and you have both right and left cerebellar hemispheres. And then you have this little like worm. It looks kind of like a worm in between. So the two right and left hemispheres, and then we have this thing. It's called the vermis. In Latin, that means worm. So when we talk about what in the world is going on with the cerebellum, we had said the two hemispheres are going to be responsible for planning and practice. So we'll talk about how people that have smaller cerebellums, or let me rephrase that, people with ADHD often, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, often have small cerebellums. And so we say, well, what kinds of problems do people who are unfortunate enough to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they have problems with scheduling and planning in addition to being really active. And complex movements. Again, we have these various parts to these the brains, and well, it ends up the vermis, this worm-like thing in between. It also is involved in movement and fine motor control and posture, sort of the same as the cerebellar hemispheres. So again, just know we have that. When we look at the hemispheres, the left and right hemispheres, there's kind of a higher portion and a smaller portion. The smaller inferior lobe is the folliculonodular lobe, and then we have, and it is going to be responsible for balance and eye movements. So you're probably saying, okay, what in the world? So we have planning and practice, and we have complex movements, posture, these kinds of things are sort of the main function of the cerebellum. So again, when we look at this thing, look at this guy's tattoo. So when you look at this guy's tattoo, it's looking between. So it's looking sideways into one of these cerebellar hemispheres. And you see it looks a little bit like a tree. And the part that looks like a tree is the white matter. And the other part that's between, the sort of dark area, this is where the cell bodies are. And so the white areas are the nerve pathways, right, where the axons are with the myelin on them. Well, what they call that is the arbor vitae, tree of life. Arbor, tree, vita, life. So the arbor vitae, it's where you can see the nerve pathways and then the regions where the cell bodies are. One of the things that sometimes is surprising, even to me, who does this, I never took typing, and yet I wouldn't say I could type fast, but I'm not saying, oh, where's the A and the T, where is that? I say, oh, A, T, somehow I know where these are, and yet I don't know. I don't know where the A is. I don't know where the C is on the keyboard. But when I'm typing, my fingers know. That's the cerebellum. Finger memory, muscle memory. I saw an interview with a great guitarist who's dead now. Anyway, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And he was left-handed, so he learned to play chords and things wrong. He taught himself to play the guitar. And he was known as one of the greatest guitarists, certainly of his time and maybe of all times. And I saw an interview with him where he was saying that because he sort of was looked up to and people were watching how he played guitar, he thought, well, shoot, I should do it correctly. I'm a role model to these people and I'm doing it wrong, so I should do it right. And he said, he just couldn't do it. He played really, really fast. And the reason for that is in the way he played, his cerebellum knew this finger goes here, here, like that. And when he started thinking about it, it slowed him way down. And so he finally had to give up on that. But it's an example of one of the main functions of the cerebellum is this coordination and fine movements, very intricate fine movements that you don't even know how you know. You just say, gosh, how do you know where that is? It does. My fingers do know. It's finger memory, that kind of thing. So ADHD, some planning issues are in the cerebellum, as well as the coordination, that kind of thing. All right, so we have some connections. We have 3 sets of connections between the cerebellum and the spine and the cerebrum, the big. And again, I've already mentioned these pathways, right? I'd said when you talk about the brain, we had said, the cerebrum and the cerebellum. Well, I said, oh yeah, that passes through the pons and through the olives. And where does it go? It goes through the middle peduncle. So again, we have 3 connections between the cerebellum and the spinal cord, and they're going to be carrying different kinds of going different places, or connecting rather different places. And so to make reference to this pathway that I've mentioned 2 other times, from the cerebrum to the cerebellum, I said it goes through the pons, through the olive, through the middle peduncle, the middle of 3. When we talk about outputs, cerebellar outputs to the spine, we had said, what in the world does the cerebellum do? It allows me to play the guitar, or to type, or Stevie Ray Vaughan to type, or for you to do ballet. It's cerebellar outputs. And so the superior peduncle, the upper connection, is for the outputs for doing these fine movements. Now the inferior peduncle is inputs from below, spinal inputs to the cerebellum is through the inferior peduncle. So middle peduncle connecting cerebrum to cerebellum, upper superior peduncle outputs, inferior peduncle inputs. All right, so we had said that oftentimes, how do we know brain function? It's through people who have brain injuries. It's unfortunate, but that's how you can figure out what these things do. So if you get a lesion injury to your cerebellum, you have coordination problems, you have abilities, locomotion problems, linguistic problems, emotional problems, difficulty in planning and scheduling tasks. You're messed up. And then, as I mentioned before, children with ADHD often have smaller cerebellums. All right. We'll come back and we're going to talk about the 3 parts of the diencephalon. So we're moving on up. So we had started with the brainstem, and then we took a sidetrack to the cerebellum, and then we're going to go to this part that is sort of in between and beneath the major parts of your brain, your cerebrum. Okay, I'll be right back.